back to Sunday Night Magic here from GP. Where are we at? Santa Clara?
Yeah, that sounds
San
about
Jose, San Francisco. They're all right in the same area. Here from GP Santa Clara, Marshall Sutcliffe. I've got with me Eduardo Sajglik, and it is our pleasure to bring you coverage of the semifinals here, where we've got Ricky Sidher, Nathan Holiday, and Joe demestrio. They are facing off against Logan Nettles, Vidianto Wijaya, and Jonathan Anghelescu. We're going to start things off here with Legacy, Eduardo. What are we going to see between Jonathan and Ricky?
So the preordain that Jonathan played actually spoils the type of deck he's on. Since normally Ponder and Brainstorm are more than sufficient for most of the blue decks in the format, but combo-focused ones like Sneak and Show from Anghelescu, those decks want preordain. They want that extra dig.
Okay.
While Ricky Snyder is on a four-color control list, a lot of nonsense between the main deck and the sideboard, but you're going to see Deathrite Shaman, Baleful Strix, Leovold, and of course, Chase the Mind Sculptor. Basically, how this matchup wants to play out is both players will set up to start with, but Ricky has to be very careful about Jonathan's ability to play out soul lands like City of Traders and Ancient Tomb and power out a turn 2 show and tell. So basically, Ricky is trying to stop Jonathan from comboing off too early and basically set the stage for his mid-game threats and late-game threats to take over.
All right, so we've got Ponder on the stack here for Ricky Sidher. He's taking a close look at his hand. I see, looks like a Force of Will, a Diabolic Edict, and I don't know what quite that is in the middle there. Couldn't quite get a look at it.
Yeah, so those are the cards. Yeah, that off the Ponder.
We see Preordain already having been cast for Jonathan, as well as both players attempt to set up, well, their game plan. And as you mentioned, Jonathan is in the seat of, I'm going to try to stop you.
Or rather,
Ricky is in the seat of, I'm going to try to stop you. And on the other side, we could see Emrakul from Jonathan Anghelescu, who's the one who's going to be the one who's trying to employ his game plan against Ricky. Now, good news for Jonathan. Ricky decided to shuffle with his Ponder. That's, of course, one of the options that you have. Look at the top three. Put them back, draw a card, or shuffle, then draw a card. That's what he did. And that's always good news, right? When you're sitting across, you're like, hey, you didn't find exactly what you needed.
Yeah, when they ponder and keep, that's not normally the best news. The shuffling is nice. It's why Ponder is so good, though. That option to shuffle. If we did not have access to that, then the card would potentially not even see Legacy play if you couldn't shuffle off the Ponder. We might see Preordain instead be the core. But the fact that you can shuffle, like the fact that you can see free cards and go like, these are not what I want, and shuffle is actually pretty powerful. And it does synergize with Brainstorm. You know, you can if you have no level shuffle effect, you can just Brainstorm, and then Ponder and go like, well, I didn't want these two cards, I'm just going to shuffle. And even in some cases, you're like, well, but the third card is actually incredible, so you can still have that option. That versatility is what makes these blue decks so great.
Speaking of, here's Brainstorm. That, of course, is the headliner card for this format, Legacy. Every time you watch Legacy on any form of coverage, we always talk about it, no matter what, as it is kind of a broken Magic card in many ways. Of course, what we've talked about throughout the course of the weekend and what anybody who has watched a game of Legacy will know is that that Scalding Tarn, the fetch lands, of course, are the other complement that make Brainstorm so powerful. And we see Ricky right now, looking to take advantage of that. He's going to put two cards from his hand back on top of his library, and if wants, he could shuffle it away. Now, it looks like he's going to go for a Deathrite Shaman and keep that fetch land intact. Now, he still has an opportunity to do so, but maybe those are just good cards and he wants to keep them.
Yeah, it really depends. Something you could do with Brainstorm as well, while Ricky is most likely going to shuffle, is you can sometimes keep a card on top that you're not 100% certain you want to keep. See how the game plan develops in front of you, and then decide whether you want to keep it or not. So you can go like, okay, I'm not sure if this card is good or not, so I'm going to keep it on top. It's only good in this scenario. And then you decide, actually, that was the scenario that happened. I'm going to keep it. Or you can go, you know what, that scenario didn't happen. I don't want to keep that card.
Right, and you see a lot of this go on here as well in Legacy about maximizing information before having to make critical decisions. And, for example, Ricky does crack his fetch. That could have just been the plan from the get-go. It also could have been that he would have liked that card on top, except for now that he sees Ancient Tomb or whatever, he's like, okay, that changes everything, and he wants to do it. And that's one of the really cool kind of intricacies that you see in this format and not quite as much in others.
Right. The ability to change your hand so much is very inherent to this format. the fact is as well that like I actually glimpsed that Ricky put back 2 lands, so it was definitely a value brainstorm. Just sculpting his hand, making sure he has plenty of spells, since after all with the Shaman free lands, he's probably fine. The other little tidbit for those who maybe are newer to Legacy is that you might have noticed that Ricky, while the land, he wasn't going to fetch one of the lands he put back, but in general, if you have 2 copies of one of the lands that you're going to fetch, don't take the one that you put on top of Brainstorm, take one that's lower so your opponent can't guess that you decided to, they know that you put lands back.
Mm-hmm.
They can guess, but why tell them that for free,
Sure.
really?
By the way, yay! Our old friend Jace the Mind Sculptor has entered the battlefield and is, in fact, doing more of what we've been talking about the last couple of minutes, brainstorming here for Ricky Sidher. Now, this is interesting because normally that's kind of the death knell, right? Like they resolve Jace and things look terrible for them, but we know that Jonathan has the ability to do things that are kind of just more powerful than Jace. Forgive me.
Yeah.
Forgive me for saying so, Jace, but it's true, right?
Right. So here, Ricky had to tap out. So that leaves Jonathan the window to try to resolve the show and tell because Jonathan has the mana advantage. That being said, because Jace is in play, it can't really be an Emrakul since Jace could just bounce it.
Right.
Jonathan sculpted this, so this is why he went for show and tell. This was all predicted pretty far in advance, multiple turns ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But he can only put really a Gristlebrand in play to get an advantage, or the sneak attack actually works to put an Emrakul at haste. That's the other play you can do, is just use the show and tell to cheat 1 mana.
Well, how about Grizzlebrand with haste here? Now, he only gets to keep it for a turn, but that's all you need, because look what he does. Immediately draws 7 cards off of Grizzlebrand, and he could draw even more, although he's probably going to want to get that attack in. Now, here's a Lotus Petal, though. That gives him access to more red mana and maybe even more threats here.
Exactly. So the plan here was draw 7, try to get this Emrakul
and he
and win.
hit the Emrakul, too! So he gets both of them. Super friends, a big hook thing off of that demon, plus a scaly tentacle from Emrakul, joins forces, sends over into the red zone, and that is Jonathan Anghelescu taking down game number 1 from Ricky Sidher here on our Legacy round. Now, on the other tables, though, and by the way, we are on Shuffle Cam, as you can see. Logan Nettles, he's the one on the far end there. We'll talk about him in just a second.
Sure.
He's up a game in his standard match against Joe Demestrio, but Nathan Holiday has won his first game over Vidianto Wijaya in the modern match. Now, Logan Nettles is a name that if you watch a ton of GP coverage, you might have seen, but if you don't, you might be like, who's this guy?
Yeah, so Logan Nettles is known as Jabberwocky online. And the reason we mention this is because when we're testing for the Pro Tour, one of the things we do is we usually look at deck lists that have done well. And
on Magic Online?
Yes. So we go on research, and we see the decks that 5-0'd leagues. And whenever Jabberwocky 5-0's a league, we always take a look. We always take our time, look at the deck list, make sure we understand it, because basically Logan Nettles has, especially in Standard, really managed to push archetypes to not perfection, but he's really refined archetypes really far. He really refined the green-red Aetherworks Marvel deck back in December of 2016. He was also the one that pushed for the 4-color energy deck this season with Gonti. So he keeps trying to innovate in Standard time and time again, and he's someone we pay a lot of attention to. It's actually really funny to me that he also paired up with Jonathan Anghelescu, who flew all the way from Germany.
He's the one, by the way, closest to us there in that light purple hoodie.
Yes. The one that we just saw playing Sneak and Show.
Mm-hmm.
And he's played thousands upon thousands of matches with Sneak and Show. That match where he used the Show and Tell as a ritual is not a common play, except for people that know that archetype very well.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can see that experience paying off, and that his 12-hour flight also paying off.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, we should mention this too. Warren Sunday Night Magic here at GP Santa Clara, but this is a big step for these gentlemen because they've made it now into the top 4, which is also a Pro Tour qualification. Right.
Every player in this top 4 has earned an invitation to Pro Tour 25th anniversary and has not had one before for that Pro Tour. So that means that all 4 of these teams, we will see them in August. And might have to face them with the team.
Yeah, in your case. So that's great. Congratulations to all of them. What a fun event. That's going to be a team Pro Tour. And it's going to resemble this format as well. So, you're going to want to check that out when it rolls around. But getting qualified for this is a really special thing. I mean, everybody wants to play in that PT. And, we've got 12 players here that are now going to be doing exactly that. One more thing about Logan Nettles. Reed Duke's cousin. No joke.
Yeah, just learned that an hour ago.
Yeah, so there you go. Now you've got the whole story on Logan. Actually, you don't have the whole entire story. Also, really nice mid-range jump shot on that guy. Yeah, so now you know everything about Logan.
Great at basketball.
Very, very solid player.
I wouldn't know.
I would pick him first out of all of these players, just blind. Like, he's also the only one I've actually played against. But
that's totally fair.
All right, it looks like one of the matches is actually underway here. That's Table B, which is, of course, is our modern match. Vidianto Wijaya. He's facing down Nathan Holiday and has already lost game number 1. Vidianto kind of going into the tough territory. He's playing a control deck in modern. That is a tall order when you're facing the breadth of different types of decks that you do in a wide open format like modern.
That's totally correct. But like what the control deck is trying to do is, in order to operate as a control deck, as you say, it's hard to operate as one. It uses both Spreading Seas and Field of Ruin as kind of semi-prison pieces in order to buy time to deploy its more powerful threat. Spreading Seas drawing a card, Field of Ruin cycling itself by replacing it with a land, and essentially locking out your opponent of mana and disrupting their mana so they can only do so much, and then going over the top with threats like these Gideon of the Trials, Snapcaster Mage, and obviously the Celestial Colonnade in play that looks innocent is anything but, just because it's a really powerful win condition attacking for 4. Especially in a matchup like this, since Nathan Holiday is on 4-color Death Shadow and will lose a lot of life. Nathan needs to be very careful, especially in these post-board games where he won't have access to cards that are not very good against blue-white, like Fatal Push, but that means the Celestial Colonnades become much more dangerous post-board. So Nathan needs to be careful not to go too low on life, where a Celestial Colonnade activation would be more than enough to kill him.
Okay. Okay, so he's going to take Ruined Halo with that Inquisition of Kozilek.
Yeah, and the reason this card works in this matchup is the 4-color Death Shadow deck usually has a very small number of threats because they have Traverse, but the actual number of named cards that are threats is not that large. Postboard is a little...
2 to 3? I mean, there's really not many, right?
Yeah, main deck, you have 4 Shadows, 4 Goyfs, and 2 Flayers. I guess you have 4 Street Wraith, but that doesn't really count.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, only under extreme circumstances do you see Street Wraiths getting in the red zone. By the way, Nathan used a Mishra's Bauble to draw a card and now used another Mishra's Bauble to draw another card. So he's kind of churning through his library.
Yeah, the Mishra's Bauble acting as like this deck's Serum Visions. So you're playing a deck without blue, but you still get access to that selection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we used to see Gitaxian Pro be, one of the key cards in this deck as well. And I think a lot of people kind of put the gravestone on this thing when that card went away, but nope. Still going.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best stories from that GP. It was the Grand Prix literally after the modern bans where Gitaxian Pro was no more.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, okay, Shadow's not really playable. And then people came up, and then it was Jerry Thompson, Josh Later, and there was a third person that unfortunately I can't remember now. Mm-hmm. But they dominated the top 4 of that GGP, coming with a build of Death Shadow that no one had really seen. I mean, it was being played online, but it was like just a month or 2 before.
Was it Sam Black?
I'm not sure.
I remember they crushed.
Oh yeah, that was
actually one of the most dominant performances, and it was really particularly impressive because of the fact that it was in modern. Where, yes, there is room to kind of break it. We saw that with the Pro Tour with Eldrazi. But still, you have to be able to beat so many different types of decks. It's really difficult. And they had, 3 people in the top 4. It's just unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. That performance was incredible. I can only think of one GP performance lifetime that was more incredible. Mm-hmm. Actually, also in Modern. It was 4 players from the same village in Japan that came with Kiki Cord. Almost only one had free buys. The others had 1 or 0, and they all top 8'd with the same 75.
That's absurd.
Yeah, and no one knew these people. They weren't like known or anything. They just came out of nowhere and dominated that tournament. That's the only performance I can think of that was more dominating than that one.
That is incredible.
Yeah. And yeah.
All right, so what do we have here? We've got Gideon of the Trials versus Tarmogoyf now. Okay.
Right. So you can kind of see Vidianto's plan here. His plan with Rune Halo and Gideon of the Trials was, I'm going to name the first thread you have on with Rune Halo. The second thread I'm going to lock down with Gideon of the Trials. Good luck getting through for damage.
Right, you're going to have more, and of course Vidianto will have access to cards like Path to Exile and such to mitigate any further threats. I kind of like the game plan. It feels like Vidianto had a feeling he was going to be facing this type of matchup a lot. And while in Modern, there's no one deck that dominates as far as a percentage of the metagame goes, when people have to choose just one deck, I wouldn't expect to see as wide of a swath of decks as I would normally at a Grand Prix. I think he was right, and I think it's paying off for him here.
Yeah, and the blue-white control deck seems like a really strong choice in a field of both Tron and Shadow, since it boasts pretty decent matchups against those decks. The mana denial strategy is working well versus both decks, and the Disruption suite of Path to Exile and Snapcaster Mage being mostly enough against Shadow, along with Rune Halo and Gideon of the Trials. So yeah, I would say that in this matchup, Vidianto is normally favored, but Nathan managed to take game one, which is actually pretty impressive. Probably Nathan got to a quick Disruption plus Fret start and managed to take over as a result. This is looking a lot worse, though, for him right now. That Gideon of the Trials is going to be a problem if he can't get rid of it. And the worst part is Nathan's going to potentially have to overcommit to the board, and then Vidianto just untaps Supreme Verdict.
Boom.
Yeah. And that's where you were going to see Vidianto really be in the driver's seat. A fired-off Supreme Verdict with a Planeswalker in play.
Okay.
At that point, you can put the advantage bar to orange-red on his side.
Okay, so let's keep an eye on that. Now, if Nathan were to win this game, what would that look like?
So for Nathan to win here, he's going to have to come up with either a threat that somehow Vidianto can't answer, which is a very unlikely route to victory, or he comes up with value. Post-board...
He outgrinds the blue-white deck?
I mean, you can sometimes do it with Liliana of the Veil, Ranger of Eos, Renegade Rallier, all these cards kind of building that slow value engine, 2-for-1s. It doesn't seem like much, but if Nathan can use his discard to prevent Vidianto getting severe card advantage from a card like Snapcaster or Cryptic, then these threats will work. And yeah, you can see Nathan being a little bit indecisive on his threat. Grimflayer, yeah, so going for the Tarmogoyf here. Let's see if that's the actual... Death Shadow is a little cheaper. Okay, so that's interesting. He went to get a Tarmogoyf for later and decided to play a Death Shadow right now.
Okay, so he did get the Goyf. It's just he couldn't cast it yet, but he had a Death Shadow in hand. Plays it out of his hand.
Yeah. Yeah, the blue-white decks usually don't play that much. They do play Graveyard Hate. That would be a pretty key piece. It's like if Vidianto can find a Rest in Peace, which is a pretty good sideboard card because of Traverse the Ovalwald and turning Tarmogoyf into a nothing or a 0/1.
A 0/1, it still exists. That's about it.
It is a shadow of its former self.
Indeed, indeed.
But yeah, you can kind of see that Vidianto can attack from so many different axes. Like right now, he's trying to disrupt Nathan's mana. Won't work quite now, but it will eventually work. If there are enough Field of Ruins and Spreading Seas and Paths, Nathan is going to get locked out of mana, and then he won't be able to cast spells.
I see that he has brought in a Kolagon's command. We were talking about potentially being able to grind card advantage against Vidianto's blue-white deck here. Well, that's one of the better ways to do it. Get your threat back, make them discard, that kind of stuff.
Right. So here there's an interesting line where Nathan... Okay, so there's a Celestial Purge that prevents it, but if there were no Paths or Celestial Purge, Nathan could have gone, for example, discard a card, since Vidianto doesn't have that many, and return Street Wraith to pump the Death Shadow and draw another card, killing the Gideon. Unfortunately here, for Nathan, there was the Celestial Purge that just dealt with the Shadow very cleanly. Yeah, Celestial Purge, one of those modern cards that you often see as a one-off most often, and yet it's so efficient when you play it.
Yeah, that card is really, really powerful. Being able to deal with a wide range of threats, including Planeswalkers and such. Instant speed, cheap, you can Snapcaster it. It's just got a lot going for it.
Yeah, like the blue-white decks are pretty cool to Liliana of the Veil in a lot of scenarios. A little less now with Gideon of the Trials being able to put pressure, but the fact that you can Celestial Purge a Liliana, just get rid of it out of the board is...
Oh.
Yeah.
it's a big relief. Let's just put it that way. And by the way, Nathan does have access to 2 copies of Liliana the Veil in his 75, so it's a consideration. Though you also see Vidianto, they're fighting a lot of different fights as they go through. He decided to use his spreading seas to take out both a black and a green mana source, leaving Nathan still with green and still with black, but not double black anymore.
Right. So, yeah, right now, we talked about that Liliana. Well, Nathan can't really cast it. And I love the point you made about the multiple axis, coming back to that. But the Vidianto is in charge here. Vidianto can attack the board. Vidianto can attack the mana base. And he can choose. And Nathan basically doesn't really have that many options. He has those discard spells to kind of get ahead, basically dismantle Vidianto's plan. And basically what Nathan does is he has to choose which axis he accepts Vidianto to attack him on. The discard spells will allow him to select where he wants to be attacked. But Vidianto is the one, although he's the control deck with the initiative in that sense, because he can choose where to attack Nathan the most efficiently.
Relative newcomer to Modern, Gideon of the Trials. What do you make of that card? Does it make the cut? Is it good enough? Is it just not quite there? Where is it at?
So yeah, one thing that made this Gideon of the Trials really see Modern play, apart from the fact that it was printed recently, is that there was a recent rules with Planeswalker changes. So now you can play multiple Gideons.
Tarmographic's back! Yes! I've been waiting for you all weekend, my friend. All right, go ahead.
So no, it's all good, yeah. Perfect. Gideon 6, Tarmogoyf 6, although probably Gideon 7 and Tarmogoyf nothing. But
right.
But yeah. It does put pressure on walkers like Liliana the Veil, which is quite nice. It's very good with Supreme Verdict since you're forcing your opponent to play multiple threats. And there are matchups where the 0 is just it's not something you can actually deal with. For example, Ad Nauseam just cold loses to it pre-board. Lantern, if there was a 4-mana Gideon, would also lose to that emblem.
They just have no way to remove a Planeswalker.
Right, so they don't actually lose. What actually technically happens is a draw. Basically, Lantern gets rid of your whole deck, and then they cycle with Academy Ruins. But really? You can't lose, and they can't lose, so you have to accept a draw.
I see.
Yeah. But yeah, focusing on the match here, you can see...
Is that a Fulminator Mage there for Nathan? It's a little shiny on the sleeve.
Yeah, that's a Fulminator Mage. Okay. A decent sideboard card to board in just to make sure that Celestial Colonnade isn't a problem.
Right.
Sometimes they tap out on their Field of Ruin and you need to get rid of that.
But in the meantime, Vidianto has really enforced this game plan that you talked about earlier of keeping the threat level low. Gideon sort of covers the first one no matter what. And, he just used Snapcaster Mage to flashback Path to Exile to take out the last threat. And now Nathan's sitting there with 2 power, none of which actually deals damage, and he's facing down, getting into the Trials in a Snapcaster Mage, but that has to favor Vidianto, right?
It does, as long as Vidianto can go over the top a little more later.
Yeah, because I do see, by the way, that Nathan has 4 cards in hand. I mean, he still has a lot of action.
Look at this.
Wow, Vidianto getting aggressive here, attacking for 10. It's actually a lethal attack. So he's going to force the issue with a block and probably just using the Fulminator Mage to kill the Celestial Colonnade. But boy, turn the tide on you, huh?
That's actually quite an interesting turn. Vidianto could have chosen to take this a little more passively, use the Field of Ruin to get rid of one of either the Blood Crypt or the Stomping Ground, but he recognizes that Nathan already has access to a ton of mana. So instead he's going you know what, I'm going to force this Fulminator off the board now and attack. Nathan's hand was kind of forced here. He had to essentially do this. But yeah, Nathan now has access to 5 mana. So technically you could get value from a Street Wraith if you really wanted to.
Right, but that's actually not winning the fight against getting into the Trial somehow. Remember, Vidianto's sitting at a nice 19 life, and he's really capitalizing on the fact that this Death Shadow deck does do such a good job of lowering its own life total by just turning the tables on Nathan Holiday.
Exactly.
Wow. By the way, Ricky Sidher equals things up on our Legacy match down on the bottom part of your graphic up on top there. So Jonathan Anghelescu, we saw him do a really cool play of using Show and Tell, and he thought, okay, well, what's the big thing you're going to put in? And it was Sneak Attack. And then he used Sneak Attack to make Grizzlebrand and then drew a bunch of cards. And then he also used Sneak Attack plus a Lotus Petal to put in an Emrakul and kill Ricky. But Ricky has fought back, and they're going to a game number 3. They're still in game 2 up on our Standard table, Joe Demestrio is playing Logan Nettles with Logan up a game there. So good match, good round so far, and the players seem to be kind of duking it out. Still up for grabs.
Yeah. And here, this is actually a really tough turn for Nathan here. He has access to 2 traverses, so he can deploy frets if he wishes to. But that call against command, unfortunately, cannot get really... he can only really get a Fulminator Mage from the graveyard. His life total is getting too low for Street Wraith, and the other frets were exiled.
Yeah, that's an interesting and important interaction here, is that, double path to exile plus the Celestial Purge all say, no, you're not getting that thing back.
Yeah. Now, as for how the texture of this game is looking, it's actually still anyone's game. There's no more Celestial Colonnade. That is a threat that Nathan would have a lot of trouble dealing with. The Fulminator Mage doing the job there. Sure, Nathan is going to have trouble dealing pressure because of that Gideon of the Trials. But Vidianto, he's only down to like 1 or 2 cards, so he's pretty low on resources. So now Nathan is going... Nathan was disrupted a lot, but now he's going to have to deploy these, 2-for-1s and efficient frets and take back the advantage with his additional resources.
Vidianto needs a Cryptic command.
Who doesn't?
You could just end the game. Yeah, who doesn't indeed? But, I mean, he could just say, yeah, bounce that, tap it, whatever, and just kill you, right?
Very close, but not quite. Because that Snapcaster Mage could die to Kolaghan's command.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's very close, yes.
Sure.
And also... Yeah, if Vidianto were to have Cryptic in a land, he could just Field of Ruin the land and then,
force the issue there?
Yeah, and then,
okay.
Nathan would have to go, and then...
Yeah, he wouldn't have enough to Cryptic at that point, but whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and the Death Shadow, I mean, it's large. It's 8/8, so it will block the Gideon, but the Gideon can do the reverse. It's just okay, well, you're too large. I'll just stay back, make you not do anything.
Yeah. So Vidianto... in a reasonable position here, but does not just have the win lined up. Even though he took a good step in that direction the last turn with his massive attack, Death Shadow doing a good job for Nathan Holiday of holding off death.
Indeed.
But like you said, Vidianto can just switch gears here.
Yeah, of course. If Vidianto gets a removal spell, he can go in. And that's what Nathan's respecting. This is why Nathan is waiting for Vidianto to untap, even draw that extra card rather than Kolaghan's commanding right now, is because if Nathan were to tap out and Vidianto was to draw a removal spell or a Cryptic, which are not unlikely draws, then Nathan would lose on the spot. While here, Nathan retains the option to be able to Kolaghan's command the Snapcaster Mage in case, worse comes to worse.
Does Nathan have to do it now? He'd need a basic Swamp to be able to still cast it after this Field of Ruin because it was the Bloodstained...
Yeah, so
it was his last black source that was last untapped black source that was targeted here.
Yeah, the Blood Crypt being targeted.
Yeah,
so so the hand's kind of forced here. The thing that's important here is Nathan is getting strip mined, but it's actually worse than strip mined because Vidianto gets to recycle his land.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, that's why Field of Ruin is incredible.
Yeah,
you get to not just destroy your opponent's land, but in some cases, and always replenish yours. But in some cases, it's just destroyed. It doesn't get replaced. And that makes it extremely powerful in these blue-white decks.
Well, he is picking up his library, just going for a shuffle.
Yeah. What I found, it seems like Nathan decided rather than making Vidianto discard a card to get back the Fulminator Mage. And basically feeling that that's probably a threat that he could have in play in terms of just disrupting Vidianto's mana to avoid Snapcaster Mage plus something big, but it's also a way to deal with a Celestial Colonnade that would be top decked by Vidianto.
Collective Brutality off the top as well. He's going to get a little info. This has been a sweet game, and we're not done yet. We are very much settled into a stalemate, and it's going to come down to how the players use their resources from here and what they draw.
And this is a really hard decision. Nathan drew the Godless Shrine rather than drawing a fetch land to get it, which means that this Rallier will not get the Revolt trigger, and thus not getting... Right now, there's not really anything to get back, though, because, again, of the exiling, apart from maybe a land. Here's the problem. Once Nathan exposes that white source of mana, That's it for his white cards. That is only white source.
Wow. So if Vidianto does have a way, a spreading seas or something like that, he will just not be able to cast the white cards anymore. But if he plays it untapped, he goes down to 3, which means that Gideon would be lethal. It could give him perhaps extra problems. All right, so he went for the collective brutality there, and he took away Supreme Verdict, and he is going to play this thing untapped.
Yeah. By the way, we can also see why Nathan didn't want to make Vidianto discard. From a previous Thoughtseize effect, the Inquisition, he got to see Vidianto's hand, and he knows that it was another Gideon of the Trial, so no need to make him discard. And here, the collective brutality is exactly right to get that Supreme Verdict off the board, which would otherwise be, well, game.
Yeah, it would. Wrath, activate Planeswalker, kill you. So he takes care of that problem and has Traverse Ulvenwald, though he did use his white mana. It didn't end up being for that Renegade Rallier. It was just actually for black mana so that he could cast the Death Shadow. So now he's got double Death Shadow, and Gideon is now being threatened.
Yeah.
He's only at 8 loyalty, and those Death Shadows are 10/10s. Wow. So this is a little bit of desperation here from Vidianto, who's going to play a second Gideon of the Trials, target the other Death Shadow, and buy himself a turn.
Right.
Hit him and Gideon a turn.
Right. So the reason Vidianto went for this play, rather than letting his Gideon die, is because this does the same thing, like basically when your Gideon dies, but the difference is that Vidianto didn't really have anything to do with his mana this turn, so it allows him to untap with Gideon of the Trials into Supreme Verdict, rather than having to...
Or Cryptic.
Or Cryptic, rather than having to retap for Gideon of the Trials.
So this gives him outs off the top of his library to win the game next turn, depending on what Nathan ends up doing and having, but Vidianto scrapping it out to try to give himself the best possible chance he can.
Yeah. I really like that play. That was really heads up, to be fair. I think most people would miss it, and it's just almost strictly superior because the loyalty on Gideon wasn't going to matter against these Death Shadows. And this way,
Wow, so we are overextended here for Nathan Holiday, but he knows that there's no sweeper. This really wants to be Supreme Verdict for Vidianto Wijaya, because now Nathan Holiday is representing a bunch of damage. Only one Gideon. It can take out one of the 10/10s effectively. Oh, it's Cryptic. Yes, it was Cryptic Command off the top of the library. That's exactly what Vidianto Wijaya needed. He taps down his opponent's team, activates Gideon, and slams for 4 to even things up. And take a look at this, Eduardo. Yeah. 1 game apiece for every player in the whole feature match area. Let's do it.
But oh man, that heads up play with Gideon gave Vidianto the chance to draw Cryptic and win the game.
Unreal.
Yeah,
I didn't think he drew it because he just sort of looked at it and maybe said something to his teammate. Normally people go and it hits the table, you know.
Sure, but like if it wasn't lethal, you'd want to keep it in hand. And he was just checking, right? Like, like it's an important match. You can take the breather space.
He just caught me off guard. He got me.
Fair enough.
Man, that was awesome stuff. A really cool line of play from Vidianto, giving him that out, and he actually ripped it. Feels like justice. Hydroblast targeting Blood Moon.
Right. What I was
really leaning on that Deathrite Shaman, huh?
Exactly. I was just gonna say the fact that we hadn't seen the graveyards is almost a shame because I wanted to know if there was a land left. But yeah, him to Tura getting spell pierced here. Ricky correctly identifying that with 2 lands and Shaman to City of Traders Island and 2 Volcanics, he's gonna basically have to jam a Fred every turn and just let Jonathan counter anything he wants.
All right. So Force of Will does resolve, so sneak attack will not be on the battlefield.
Right, but like look at this, right? Even if Ricky knew that Jonathan had a counterspell, the fact that he ran the Him to Torak means that his Force of Will was able to stop that sneak attack. And yeah, this Him to Torak is just incredible here.
Speaking of Him to Torak, there's another one. 2 of the 3 cards at random.
Have you ever been hit by that card?
Oh, yes.
It's horrible.
It's awful.
At least I'm glad that the incorrect art got countered and the correct art got
shown. Oh, I love that. I was going to ask you what you like.
Oh, the wolf. Come on.
Yeah, there you go.
The wolf is awesome. But yeah.
What's up with Ricky running 2 different artworks, by the way? He's running the Modern Masters one as well as This super old school? That's
It's
crazy.
it's like the From the Vault 20. Maybe he only had one From the Vault 20 box. You don't really want to buy 4 of those,
okay,
right?
Fair enough.
Yeah. But yeah, okay, this Blood Moon. I was going to say this is back and forth because basically Ricky managed to turn around the game that looked bad, right?
Yes.
No source for that Blood Moon. It was in play. Managed to kill it, counter the sneak attack, get that him to Turek, and now the Blood Moon comes back. And there's no lands in Ricky's graveyard, and I'm not sure if Jonathan...
and he rips sneak attack. Now, he still needs to find a threat, but this has been a nice sequence for Jonathan. And remember, he's the one with a basic island there as well, so, he can find things like Ponder and that kind of stuff to help him dig through his library. He found something. He found Grizzlebrand right away, and that's going to do it. Jonathan Anghelescu wins his match 2-1 over Ricky Sidher. So, we've got 2 different Game 3s happening. Joe Demestrio versus Logan Nettles on Standard. Nathan Holiday versus Vidianto Wijaya on Modern. And it's going to have to be Joe Demestrio and Nathan Holiday winning their matches if their team is going to advance to the finals here at GP Santa Clara. On the other side of the table, just one little win.
Yeah.
Jonathan's like, come on, guys, just the one.
Please get it. I think the legacy portion here was really, really interesting.
Absolutely.
Jonathan and Ricky both really mastering their decks. Ricky not losing a match allegedly all weekend. Jonathan with all his matches. And here, Ricky's got his alleged first personal loss of the weekend. But you know what? If, as you say, if Nathan Holiday and Joe Demestrio can come back, then they can take it down.
They can avenge his only loss.
That's the nicest part about this team tournaments. You lost. It feels bad. I mean, you feel bad that you let your teammates down, but, you might have played your hardest and that's it. But the nice part is you might have lost, but your teammates could win for you.
Oh, that's the best.
Yeah. That is definitely the best. Right. So
it looks like our other match, by the way, is already finished. If that one went long enough past this one, we would watch it, but it looks like they're already done.
Yeah. Right. So here, just by the way, to kind of recap the matchups, we just saw the end of the Legacy Sneak and Show versus 4-Color Control, or 4-Color Good Stuff, as those Legacy decks usually have. Nathan Holiday and Vidianto Wijaya playing for Nathan Holiday, Grixis Shadow, not Grixis Shadow, sorry, 4-Color Death Shadow, and Vidianto playing Blue-White Control, a matchup where I believe Vidianto's favored. And then Joe Demestrio and Logan Nettles playing the grind of the Teamer Energy Mirror. Funny story is that I can't remember if it was Ricky or Vidianto, but one of them said that Logan Nettles' one of Commit Memory was by far the most impressive card of this weekend to him. Yes. Because that's what's the most impressive card you've seen, and he talks about a format that he wasn't even involved in.
He just looked over and saw it and was like, wow, that looks good, back to business.
I mean, come on, time reversal's great.
Sure. So we've got right now people getting all shuffled up here for these Game 3s that are upcoming. And I saw Logan Nettles look over at Jonathan and Vidi and say, hey, would you keep this? What do you guys think? And right now it looks like they're just presenting decks for the Modern match as well. Great stuff. This has been really fun.
Yeah. And you can kind of see the team tournament of this structure has actually been very interesting, right? Because one thing that I saw from the profiles from Logan, Vidianto, and Jonathan was they kind of didn't really know each other before. But because you don't have to split decks, you can just play whatever you feel comfortable with. As long as you find people of other formats that that you believe and are comfortable letting them play, then you're just good to go.
Yeah, it's been interesting just checking out this Team Trios structure, and we will be seeing more of this throughout the year. Very interesting in the sense that, it hasn't happened, but I could even just not like you. I could be like, who are you? Leave me alone. Just make sure you keep winning your matches, and we could play, Now, obviously, the teams are advantaged if, there is some help and some communication between them and that kind of thing. But, with the limited events, you do not have that. You need to work with the person. You need to make decisions together, during the build and the processing of all that stuff. But here, It's really interesting. It's not the case. It is a little bit more siloed off. I like it, though.
Yeah.
I don't know. It means that we've seen some teams that we wouldn't normally see, I think.
That's very true.
Also, I wish I was like a super legacy specialist because they were in high demand. Like, I could have got on a sweet team.
Yeah, the legacy specialist is usually in high demand, and Nettles and
Well, they're usually not, right? Usually they're like, oh, I got my 1 GP for the year. I hope I go crush it. And, here it's like everybody's ringing your phone and saying, hey, man, we need somebody.
If I wanted to shout out for a gold level pro that would qualify there, that would be land specialist Jarvis Yu.
Oh, yeah, definitely. He comes to mind for sure. I'm sure he had a lot of Facebook messages asking to team up. We see Mishra's Bobble here from Nathan Holiday.
And you see as well like the fetch land and the street wraith. So Nathan decided, because Nathan got to see his own card, he got to decide, is this a card I want? And then decided to fetch it away and then draw with street wraith. That way, not drawing the card. And that's what Mishra's Bobble allows you to do in combination with a fetch and a street wraith.
We also see a Inquisition of Kozilek here from Nathan Holiday. Unfortunately for us, Vidianto Wijaya has a completely foiled out deck, and it just I see a big shiny spot on the top of the ceiling, but I can't actually see the cards. I see a Spell Snare, Detention Sphere. There's a Celestial Purge.
So, I don't have
Path to
sunscreen.
Exile. Yeah, I know. Hey, don't look directly into the Path to Exile, man. You could damage your eyesight. There's a Glacial Fortress, which is how the shower felt this morning when the heater wouldn't work. And I can't quite see. Oh, Supreme Verdict. What's that second to last card on the end, though? That's the only one I can't see.
It was a Mystic Gate, I suspect.
Okay.
I don't think Vidianto would keep a one-lander, and it looked like Mystic Gate more than other cards. So Nathan taking the Detention Sphere, probably because it's while every card kind of trade 1-for-1, that one is extraordinarily dangerous for Nathan. If it ever hits a 2-for-1, then Vidianto would be very, very far ahead. Yeah, so basically using the second Inquisition.
You're right, it was Mystic Gate.
Yep. Yeah, and interestingly, Vidianto decided to play his island, I might as well have the Spell Snare up on turn 1, even if Nathan gets the information, it's fine. I'd rather play my spells if I need to.
This is plan A, by the way, right? Cycle a bunch of stuff, start tearing apart their hand, stick one threat, and have it close out the game in a couple of turns. So far, so good for Nathan Holiday, though. Oh, wow, look at this. Just ripping apart Vidianto's hand. But, one of the things I'll caution anybody who thinks, okay, he's just crushing him at this point, is that if he does not back this up with a threat, it often falls apart. You often think, okay, I got him down, no sweepers, no more removal, we did it, and then you lose anyway because you don't do anything for 4 turns, and they're like, okay, sure, play a bunch of card draw, Serum Vision, stuff like that, and then all of a sudden they have a stacked hand again.
Right, so what you're saying is totally correct, and what Nathan is trying to do here is, he goes, you know what, Supreme Verdict, that's an expensive card, especially when you're down to 1 land. If you don't have anything, I can just go for Death Shadow, potentially another, and then just try to kill you before that Supreme Verdict comes, or I could draw another Thoughtseize for it, since Vidianto has the Spell Snare. I saw, however, that Vidianto drew, I believe, a Gideon of the Trials, which makes that plan go really wrong, since what's probably going to happen here is Nathan's going to decide my best chance to beat the Supreme Verdict is just going to be to jam these 2 Death Shadows, so using the Traverse and the Shadow. Although, actually, it doesn't seem like Nathan has Delirium to use up the Traverse.
He's got a lot of lands, creatures, and he does, right?
Artifact.
He cycled a Street Wraith, too.
Creature, land, artifacts. So he does have Delirium.
Yep.
That deck gets there quickly.
He sure does.
Right.
This is turn 3. He hasn't even played a land yet.
Yeah. So
what in the world?
Right. So Nathan has 2 fetch lands, and basically what I think he's going to do, and what's going to ultimately not work unless he top decks a Thoughtseize, is Nathan's going to go untap fetch land, traverse for another shadow, have 2 6/6s, try to draw into a Street Wraith with that other fetch land, and basically kill Vidianto in 1 shot before that Supreme Verdict comes online. He may choose to go slower and try to play around the Supreme Verdict by not jamming both shadows. For sure, he's going to play 1 this turn.
It is an incredibly risky but also important line of play that he has to deal with here because he is at 1 game apiece, and if he loses this game, let's say that line just doesn't pan out for him, that's it.
Yeah.
The round's over. They're out of the tournament.
Yeah, and this Gideon of the Trials.
What a great rip.
Yeah, drawing it from Virianto is just, it works so well in his game plan, right? Like the Supreme Verdict. Nathan can't really pressure the Gideon because if he just plays the second fret, well, Gideon goes like, okay. The main reason Nathan would have not wanted to traverse right away was if his plan was to get a higher value creature, a Renegade Rallier, for example. So his plan might have been to force Vidianto to Supreme Verdict and then play Renegade Rallier off that traverse, essentially being able to rebuild his board as well as possible. Now, with the Gideon of the Trials, Nathan needs to go way above this and may have to use the traverse for Ranger of Eos, most likely.
Just to keep his threat level stocked high.
Exactly.
Brutal.
So also, the problem here for Nathan is he can only take so much damage. This Gideon of the Trials being a 4/4 is actually an issue.
True. He's down to 10. He's got a Bloodstained Mire there. That's going to put him down to minimum 9. And he could go further.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Nathan does want to go further. You know, these Death Shadows are great. But yeah, the life total you want to really care about on Nathan is 5. Anything below 5, and Vidianto can usually one-shot Nathan with a Celestial Colonnade or a Gideon of the Trials, using a Cryptic Commander or a Supreme Verdict.
Oh, that never happens.
So for those,
only last game.
Do you want to recap what happened for those that just tuned in?
That was awesome. Vidianto Wijaya had actually made a really cool play where he used Gideon of the Trials to blank one of the 2 Death Shadows on the other side of the battlefield, then cast another Gideon, of course losing the first one, blanked the next Death Shadow to give himself a chance. This is, of course, with Nathan Holiday sitting at 2 or 3 life, and he actually just ripped a Cryptic Command, said tap down your shadows, activate Gideon, kill you, and it was really exciting. And yeah, this is exactly what you were just describing here, Eduardo. It is not good news for Nathan Holiday. He now has 2 Death Shadows, and he knows Vidianto Wijaya has Supreme Verdict in his hand.
Exactly.
He's just like, here, have some more.
Right.
Can't do anything about it.
Well, thankfully for Nathan Holiday, he decided to essentially get the... there are 2 things that are important here.
Okay.
The fact that Nathan did not crack his fetch lines right away, so he can decide what his life total is a little down the line. The second thing is he grabbed that Ranger of Eos off the Traverse. So while Vidianto is kind of priced in to cast the Supreme Verdict and clear the board, the fact that the Ranger of Eos can rebuild by getting 2 shadows does give Nathan a chance. However, this is over 2 or 3 turns. He has to cast the Ranger, and then he has to cast the Death Shadows. Because of that, that's giving Vidianto a ton of time. Plus, Nathan will be at potentially 8 with those fetch lands at least. Because he will need the mana.
He doesn't have white mana yet, for example.
Right, and then he would just lose to another Cryptic or a Path because Vidianto can just go Supreme Verdict, attack you down to 6. Nathan's priced in, has to go down to 4, and then Vidianto could just Path the Ranger. Of course, Nathan could draw a land and play a Shadow right away. And that's where it gets really interesting, actually.
Sure. Yeah, but in the near term, things are looking very good for Vidianto Wijaya as he can simply sweep the board away. He can even get in with Gideon. He'll have Gideon just sitting there. That's for the next threat that Nathan ends up putting out. Yeah. And this, by the way, puts Nathan down to 6.
Yeah, and I think if you've seen like the games with this blue-white control deck versus the Death Shadow deck, you can see how good Gideon of the Trials is in these matches.
Really good. It's been so annoying for Nathan each game we've seen it.
Right. It combines as removal spell plus kill condition.
Yeah, very strong.
And it costs 3 mana.
And the right price, exactly, 3 mana. So really good stuff from Gideon of the Trials. I don't know how good Gideon is in the broader context of Modern, but I like it in this matchup, I'll tell you that.
Oh, yeah, it's really great in this matchup. The fact, if you need 2 frets, it's a little worse against the Grixis Shadow versions. They have access to Stubborn Denial to get rid of the Gideon of the Trials. So they play a little more selection. So they also have like Tasigur, which their threats are just 1 mana cheaper, so they can get rid of the Gideon a little easier. But it's still hard for them. And yeah, Nathan top decking the Bloodstained Mire is actually a good thing. He gets to cast the Death Shadow right away, and that means that Vidianto needed a Cryptic Command.
Vidianto just flashed him the Cryptic Command, and that is the round going to Logan Nettles, Vidianto Wijaya, and Jonathan Anghelescu. We have our finalists, by the way, on the other side of our bracket. Fry, Ho, and Martin won their match, and they're going to be in the finals as well. Congratulations to all of our finalists running their way through this GP. Just one more round to go to see if they're going to be able to be in. Wow. Man, Vidianta Wijaya finishing. He's just going to like get those two cards together, Cryptic Command, get into the trials, put those in a frame. We're going to come back with more Sunday Night Magic here from GP Santa Clara right after these messages.